How's it going, everyone? This is the George here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This is the fourth film in the Indiana Jones franchise, once again directed by Steven Spielberg. This is the last indie film that Steven Spielberg directs. This came out in 2008 and once again starred Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, Karen Allen as Marion, as well as Shia LaBeouf as Mutt Williams, Kate Blanchett as the Soviet agent Spalko, and this film takes place in 1957. The bad guys this time around are the Soviets. And at the beginning of the film, Indy is forced by the Soviets to go into Area 51, and a fight ensues. And the FBI question Indiana Jones, and because of his involvement with the Soviets, he is suspended with it from his college, and now he's working with Mutt Williams to look for his old friend Oxley and Mutt's mom Mary, although we don't know that she's marrying yet, but we learn later on in the film. And all this to get to the Crystal Skull. So, with Indiana Jones and King Crystal Skull, I didn't watch this around the same time I had watched the other Indiana Jones movies. I'd watched the other movies around 2009, 2010, and King of the Crystal Skull didn't come on TV, I think, until like 2011, 2012. That's when I finally saw it for the first time. I didn't see it in theaters. I got into Indiana Jones movies after it came out in theaters. And I remember even as a 16-year-old watching King of the Crystal Skull, I couldn't help but feel like this feels weird. This feels out of place. And not in the same way that Temple of Doom feels a bit out of place, because Temple of Doom still feels like an Indiana Jones movie for the most part, even though it's darker and there's more fantasy aspects in that film. But right from the beginning of this movie, it just felt off with the Soviets and their trucks going to Area 51, and you have these college kids, these young people just driving around just like goofing off and you're hearing like music from that time being played. Like there's no John Williams score being played. And Harrison Ford is still great in this movie. But the lighting, and I never really paid attention to the lighting of the movie, but if you look at the lighting of the previous Indiana Jones movies, they're not that bright. I mean, Last Crusade, the lighting did feel brighter compared to Temple of Doom and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's still, the lighting was handled pretty well. Here, it just feels very bright. It's kind of distracting. I never really comment on the lighting of a movie, particularly an Indiana Jones movie, but it was just so noticeable in here. And it's not just here. When Indy's in his college teaching, it's very noticeable. When he's at the restaurant talking with Mutt, it's very noticeable. Even like at the end of the film, it's noticeable. The lighting is just very, very bright. And they're in Area 51, and you got to always see the Ark of the Covenant. That they have some moments where, hey, there's this thing, there's that thing, and it tries to play off as fan service. I feel like the earliest form of fan service. And I'll be honest, seeing the arc at the beginning is cool, because the beginning of the film until the certain point is really cool. The action sequences are really cool. Harrison Ford, despite being in his mid 60s, he still got it. The way he's kicking butt is still very awesome. But then there's that nuke the fridge moment, and I have criticized in my Temple of Doom review the scene where Indy, Willie, and Short Round use an inflatable raft to escape a crashing plane, and they're falling from a very high point down below, and they manage to survive without breaking any bones. That scene is genius compared to the fact that Indy hid in a fridge and survived despite the fridge being thrown into the air, falling multiple times, turning him around. In fact, this is probably for some weird reason, this is like the most indestructible that Indiana Jones has been. Compared to the other movies, he's not really getting beaten. He's actually like pretty strong, and I mean, good for Indy for taking care of himself. Well, good for Harrison Ford as well for taking care of himself to be able to do a lot of this stuff in his 60s. But good lord, it felt like the action was the most tame in this film compared to the other Indiana Jones movies. I know Last Crusade, it wasn't as violent, but the action was still very good. So as I said early on, because Indy got into Area 51 with Soviets and the FBI is investigating it, Indy is right now suspended. Jim Broadbent plays a character that's not Marcus Brody, but he plays the Marcus Brody role. And this is where the absence of certain characters is obviously felt, and we find out not only Marcus is dead, but Indy's father is dead. Apparently, they asked Sean Connery to return for a small appearance, but Sean Connery was enjoying retirement too much, and he didn't want to come back for a really brief role. Same thing with John Rice Davis. Apparently, he was offered to return for the wedding scene at the end, but he did not want to return for what was going to be a brief appearance. And this film went through many stories where other characters were supposed to return. Apparently, Willie and Short Round at one point were in one of the stories, but that story never went through. So Indy later meets Mutt Williams, played by Shia LaBeouf. And Shia LaBeouf, this is in between the first two Transformer movies. Transformers 1 came out in 2007, Revenge of the Fallen came out the following year. And I know a lot of people give Shia LaBeouf a lot of crap. He's not the worst thing in this movie. He's not. Mutt Williams isn't the worst character. He says some cringe lines at times, and yeah, Shia doesn't really give the best performance, which is odd because I thought he was actually really good in the first Transformers movie, and I didn't mind his performance in the second film as much as I have a lot of problems with Revenge of the Fallen. But despite that, he's not the worst thing about this film. It's this character named Mac that's the worst because at first he's a friend to Indiana Jones, then he betrays him to work with the Soviets. Then during a chase sequence later on in the film he's back on Indy's side, and then like right at the end, as they stumble upon the alien stuff, then they stumble upon the treasures. He betrays them again, and he gets what's coming to him. You don't feel bad for this character. Yeah, he was the most annoying character in this film. I'm surprised he doesn't get talked about more when it comes to problems with this movie. I felt nothing for this character. But in regards to Mutt, I'll be honest. If I were to pick having Mutt or Willie back in an Indiana Jones movie, I would probably go with Mutt actually, because this character did not annoy me. Although it's very noticeable that his performance is not that good compared to Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones. In Harrison Ford is acting circles around him. There's some cool chase sequences where with Mutt and Indy riding on the motorcycle. And for some odd reason, when the bad guy's car crashes into the Marcus Brody statue, the head just randomly just falls on falls into the car of the bad guys and just lands on the bad guy's lap, just out of nowhere. So Indy and Mutt go to Peru and they find this crystal skull, but then they run into the Soviets and there's some boring exposition and discussion between the Soviets and Indy as Indy is cuffed to this chair, and then we find out that Butt's mom is Marion Ravenwood, once again played by Karen Allen, and Karen Allen's very good as Marion once again. I still like the chemistry between her and Indy. Seeing Indy's face when she sees her, he's like all like happy and giddy, and then Indy finds out that Mutt is Marion's son. We still have the classic Jones being scared of snakes. We also see Oxley, who has gone pretty crazy, played by John Hurt. And Hurt does pretty fine with this role as well. And we see more of Kate Blanchett as Spalko, the main villain. And I like Kate Blanchett a lot as an actress, but as the villain in this film, it's not that she has a terrible performance, it's just this is a very bland and weak villain compared to some of the other villains that we have gotten in Indiana Jones movies. And Kate Blanchett has shown she can play a villain. Her villain character, Hela, in Thor Ragnarok was one of the better MCU villains, in my opinion. So she's capable of portraying villains, but probably with a better story, she could have done a better job. A lot of the issues with this film are the story decisions that were made, which kind of makes sense because George Lucas wrote the story for this film, or was one of the writers for this film, and this was a few years after the prequels. And I love George Lucas. I love that he gave us Star Wars. I love Star Wars, the original that he directed. I love Star Wars Revenge of the Sith that he also directed. That's my second favorite Star Wars movie after Empire Strikes Back. But we know he's not a great storyteller. And a lot of the weird things that happen in this movie with, Mud swinging with the monkeys later on in the film, some of the few things with the CGI gophers, it's like the Lucasisms. It's like they carried on into this movie. And there were some disagreements apparently between Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas when George Lucas wanted to go with this alien angle that they went with in this film. Apparently, at the time, early on, Ford and Spielberg were like, "Oh, I don't know about this." When it came to the MacGuffin, apparently Spielberg and Lucas disagreed. Now they're still friends, and Spielberg has come to George Lucas' defense and said, "Blame me, don't blame George." But still, some of the decisions that were made, it's like it feels like Spielberg should have known better to allow some of these things to happen. The CGI is very iffy, and apparently Spielberg didn't want to rely that heavily on CGI. But as the film progressed, they used more CGI. You have CGI ants at one point, chasing everyone. I thought that was just weird. I get they're trying to replicate, the other films where bugs or little annoying animals such as snakes and rats are bothering our group of characters. But it just doesn't feel the same, probably because this is out in an open field. And this is happening after what was an okay chase sequence that also had a sword fight between Spalko and Mutt. And as Mutt's fighting, he's getting attacked by these branches like in between his legs. It's just why do we need that in this movie? And this is before, and that sword fight between him and Spalko was right before he's swinging with the monkeys. And this car that Marion is driving lands on a tree, and the tree just like whacks it back. It's just why? Why is this needed? Oh, why are some of these decisions happening? Why did Spielberg let George Lucas? Guess why do you was he okay with some of the stuff George Lucas wrote? That's what I'm trying to say because I'm baffled by it. And again, while I love the chemistry between Harrison Ford and Karen Allen, and I like that Indy and Marion are falling back in love again, it feels a bit rushed. And the moment this happens is when Indy's telling Marion that basically the other women in his life were never like her, and all of a sudden she went from being very annoyed and a bit resentful towards Indy to looking at him with stars in her eyes, and is all of a sudden falling back in love with Indy again. And even Mutt is looking at her a few times like, wait, what? Like questioning it. And Indy right away just embraces being a dad when he finds out that Mutt is his son. And he's like, early on in the film, when Mutt tells him that, hey, I dropped out of school, I want to work with like motorcycles and stuff, and he's like, oh, that's cool, do what you want. As soon as he finds out Mutt's his son, he's like, you're going back to school, and he's like saying like calling him like son, all this, and it kind of gets on Mutt's nerves a little bit, which I find to be pretty funny. Funny because I feel like Indy's the type of person to do that as well. And again, with this movie, that like I said, there are nods to the other films. We do see the picture of Sean Connery as Henry Sr. from Last Crusade. Again, we see the Ark at the beginning at Area 51, like for a little bit. And again, you have those transition scenes where, hey, when they're traveling somewhere, you see the map. It shows them where they're going, what pathway they're taking. The John Williams score is still pretty good. At one scene, they're being chased out of this temple, and it kind of reminds me of the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy's being chased by the natives after his failure to get the treasure at the beginning of the film. It's like there's nods, there's references. Like they're doing things that make it feel like an Indiana Jones movie still. but it also feels like an Indiana Jones movie just feels out of place because the action, while still entertaining, also feels clean. Like Indy gets barely any scratches in this film. It's just what what were they planning on doing with this film? I have no idea. And then there's the stuff happening at the end with the aliens and the flying saucer, and Matt gets sucked into this portal. He got what was coming to him after being the biggest flip flopper in the history of movies because it felt like he changed sides so many times in this movie. And then at the end, we have the wedding between Marion and Indy, which I thought was very adorable. And Indy got back into his college and is now an associate dean, which, hey, good for him. Although I will say, this is actually something I want to bring up with Indy being a professor. It's like, we know that Indy has fought Nazis. We know Indy has gone on so many adventures, killed some bad people. And yet, it isn't until the thing with the Soviets where all of a sudden the colleges is saying, hold on, your antics have finally caught up to you. It's I just wonder, has the school ever called into question that, hey, why are you traveling around the world getting into fights with people? It's the stuff with the Soviets that finally apparently got him into trouble. But he did get back into the school, and then we have the nice, sweet wedding between Marion and Indy, and Bud's about to put the hat on, but Indy takes it and he gives a look to Mutt that says, "Not so fast, kiddo." And then there's the end of the film. And overall, with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull, the performances for the most part were fine. I mean, Harrison Ford and Karen Allen gave the best performances in the film. John Hurt was okay with his performance. Shia LaBeouf didn't annoy me with his performance. Kate Blanchett, her character wasn't all that remarkable. It's like Spalko, like I forget about this character at times. Like it's been a while since I rewatched this movie. I kind of forgot about her character when rewatching this movie. CGI was just not good. And for a, and I don't know, did certain animals have to be CGI'd? I mean, the other films were known for having real animals, and I know times have changed. It's been 19 years after Last Crusade came out when they used real breaded rats. But even still, it just looks so off. But I don't hate this movie. I do enjoy the action. I enjoy the score. The Indiana Jones stuff that's still very good and entertaining works. And I like the ending of the movie, despite the flying saucer stuff happening at the end. After that stuff happens, the wedding between Mary and Indy, I like that. I like the chase sequences. I enjoyed the one where Indy and Mutt are on the motorcycle escaping. But again, it just feels like wasted potential. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was wasted potential. I'm gonna give this film a C plus. I know that sounds a bit generous with this movie, but I do enjoy many aspects of this movie. Some of the ideas were good. I didn't mind the idea of Mutt Williams being Indy's son and Indy reuniting with Marion. It's just the Crystal Skull was the worst MacGuffin. The villains were forgettable, and the line just really annoyed me. But what are your thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what's your least favorite Indiana Jones movie? Because I know for some people they do like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and they consider Temple of Doom to be their least favorite. Let me know in the comments down below, and I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that likes the Indiana Jones movies, and I hope to see you guys real soon. Take care, everyone.